The smell hit Jonas Cade the moment he walked through the cantina doors. It was a mix of burned metal, cheap booze, and desperation. The kind of smell that stuck to places where bad deals were made and worse secrets were sold. He paused in the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light that flickered from broken neon signs overhead. This wasn't his first time in a dive like this, and it wouldn't be his last. The cantina was tucked away in the belly of Sigma Station, far from the main docks where honest traders did their business. Here, in the shadows, different kinds of merchants came to make deals that the authorities wouldn't approve of. Jonas picked his way through the crowd, past tables filled with rough-looking spacers and shady dealers. He found an empty booth in the back corner, one that gave him a clear view of the entire room while keeping his back protected by the wall. Old habits from old wars never died. He settled into the cracked leather seat and waited. The cantina's patrons continued their conversations, most too drunk or too focused on their own problems to notice one more weathered spacer looking for work. Jonas preferred it that way. Attention was dangerous in his line of work. A small metallic data chip sat on the table in front of him, its dull surface catching the weak light from the bar. He'd been staring at it for 10 minutes, knowing that once he picked it up, there would be no going back. His ship, the Endless Horizon, was falling apart piece by piece. The fuel tanks were nearly empty, and the repair bills were piling up faster than he could pay them. He needed this job, even if everything about it felt wrong. Jonas had been flying cargo runs for 15 years, ever since he'd left the military. Most of the time, he moved legitimate goods from one system to another. Machine parts, medical supplies, food shipments. Nothing that would keep him awake at night. But lately, those kinds of jobs had been getting harder to find. Competition was fierce, and the big shipping companies were pushing out independent operators like him. That left jobs like this one, the kind that started in dark corners and ended with someone getting hurt. A man slid into the booth across from him, moving like a shadow. Jonas hadn't seen him coming, which immediately put him on edge. The stranger was pale and thin, dressed in expensive clothes that looked out of place in the grimy cantina. His fingers were long and delicate, like a musician's, but there was something cold about his eyes. "You're Cade," the man said. It wasn't a question. Jonas nodded once, his hand moving closer to the blaster on his hip. "You're the one who sent the message." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He leaned forward, speaking in a soft voice that somehow carried over the noise of the cantina. "I have a proposition for you. Something that could solve your financial problems." "I'm listening," Jonas said, though every instinct told him to walk away. The stranger's pale fingers drummed against the table in a steady rhythm. "You're perfect for this job," he continued. "No complications, no questions asked. Just pick up some cargo and deliver it to the right people. Simple work for good money." Jonas had heard those words before. In his experience, nothing was ever simple, and easy money usually came with a price that wasn't worth paying. But his ship was dying, and he was running out of options. "What kind of cargo?" he asked, his voice flat. The man's smile widened slightly. "Special cargo. The kind that pays well because it's valuable." Jonas felt his stomach tighten. He'd transported questionable cargo before: weapons, stolen goods, contraband technology. But something about this man's tone suggested something different, something worse. "I need details," Jonas said. The stranger glanced around the cantina, making sure no one was listening. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Zari," he said, the word hanging in the air between them like a curse. Jonas felt the blood drain from his face. He'd heard of the Zari before, though he'd never seen one in person. They were a rare alien species, known for their glowing purple skin and their ability to sense emotions. For centuries, they'd lived in isolation, on distant worlds, avoiding contact with the rest of the galaxy. But in recent years, that isolation had made them targets. Slavers, warlords, and crime bosses had discovered that the Zari's empathic abilities made them incredibly valuable. They could be used to control workers, manipulate enemies, or simply serve as exotic prizes for wealthy collectors. "You want me to transport people," Jonas said, his voice hard. "Cargo," the man corrected. "A widow and her child. High-value cargo that needs to reach Sector 5. The Baron's men will take delivery, and you'll collect your fee. 100,000 credits." The number hit Jonas like a physical blow. 100,000 credits would not only save his ship but set him up for months, maybe even a year. But the price? What does the Baron want with them? Jonas asked. Though he already suspected the answer, the stranger's expression didn't change. The Baron's business is not your concern. You're a transporter, not a philosopher. Your job is to pick up the cargo and deliver it safely. Nothing more. Jonas stared at the data chip on the table. Inside would be coordinates, contact information, and payment details. All he had to do was pick it up, and he'd be committed. He thought about his ship, about the mounting bills, about the empty fuel tanks. He thought about sleeping in a real bed instead of the cramped cabin of a dying ship. He thought about the Zari woman and child who would be counting on him to keep them safe. His hand hovered over the chip. Half payment up front, Jonas said finally, hating himself for the words. The stranger nodded. You'll receive the first half when you meet the merchandise. The second half upon delivery. Jonas picked up the chip and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The metal felt cold against his fingers. Where and when? He asked. Docking Bay 99. Midnight. The man stood up, straightening his expensive jacket. Don't be late, Mr. Cade. The Baron doesn't appreciate delays. With that, he melted back into the crowd, leaving Jonas alone with his guilt and the weight of the data chip in his pocket. Docking Bay 99 was located in the oldest section of Sigma Station, where the lights were dim and the security cameras had been broken for years. Jonas arrived 10 minutes early, his hand resting on the grip of his blaster. The air here was cold and thin, filled with the constant hiss of life support systems working overtime. He'd spent the hours since the meeting trying to convince himself that this was just another job. Cargo was cargo, whether it was machine parts or people. But the lie felt hollow even to him. The bay was mostly empty except for a small, beat-up freighter sitting near the loading platform. Two figures stood beside it, a woman and a small child. Even from a distance, Jonas could see the faint purple glow of their skin. As he got closer, he could make out more details. The woman was tall and graceful, despite the worn-out clothes she wore. A tattered shawl covered her shoulders, but couldn't hide the intricate patterns that seemed to be carved into her purple skin. The patterns glowed softly, like starlight against a twilight sky. Her eyes were the most striking thing about her. They were a deep purple color, like precious gems, and they watched Jonas approach with a mixture of dignity and defiance. This was not someone who would go quietly. The child, her daughter, Jonas assumed stayed close to her mother's side, partially hidden behind the folds of the shawl. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. In her small hands, she clutched a ragged cloth doll that had seen better days. Stuffing poked out from a torn seam, but she held it like it was the most precious thing in the universe. Jonas stopped a few feet away from them, unsure how to begin. In all his years of transporting cargo, he'd never had to look his freight in the eye. You're the cargo? He asked, immediately regretting how harsh his voice sounded. The woman straightened, lifting her chin with quiet pride. I am Lyra, she said, her voice clear and strong. This is my daughter, Kira. The names hit Jonas harder than he'd expected. Names made things personal, and personal was dangerous. He'd learned long ago that it was easier to do difficult jobs when you didn't think about the people involved. Do you have belongings to load? He asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Lyra's expression hardened. We have nothing left, she said bitterly. They took everything when they took us. All we have are ourselves. Jonas nodded toward his ship, the endless horizon, which sat in the next bay over. Let's go then. Lyra hesitated, her eyes darting toward the bay entrance as if calculating whether she could make a run for it. Jonas caught the look and shook his head. Don't even think about it, he said. You wouldn't get 10 meters before station security picked you up. And trust me, you don't want to find out what they do with you. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and she took her daughter's hand. Come, Kira, she said softly. As they walked toward the endless horizon, the little girl looked up at Jonas with curious eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Is this your home? She asked, her voice small but clear. Jonas felt something twist in his chest at the innocence in her question. No, he said shortly. It's a ship. Do you live here? Kira continued, apparently not discouraged by his gruff response. For now, Jonas replied, wishing she would stop talking. Kira tilted her head, studying him with those unnaturally bright eyes. It felt like she was looking right through him, seeing things he'd rather keep hidden. you're sad, she said suddenly, her tone matter-of-fact. Jonas stopped walking. What? You feel sad, Kira repeated, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Really, really sad. Like when Mama cries at night. Jonas stared at the child, his mind racing. He'd heard stories about the Zari's empathic abilities, how they could sense and even influence emotions. But he'd always assumed they were just stories, exaggerated tales told by spacers who'd had too much to drink. Now, with this little girl looking at him like she could see straight into his soul, he wasn't so sure. Stay with your mother, he said, gruffly, pushing past them toward the ship. The endless horizon wasn't much to look at. She was an old Corellian freighter, the kind that had been popular 30 years ago but was now considered obsolete. Her hull was scarred and patched, her paint faded and chipped. But she was Jonas's home, and she'd kept him alive through more dangerous situations than he cared to remember. He led Lyra and Kira up the loading ramp and into the ship's cramped interior. The corridors were narrow and dimly lit, lined with exposed pipes and cable conduits. It wasn't luxury, but it was functional. Jonas stopped at a small cabin near the back of the ship. The room was barely large enough for the single cot and small storage locker it contained. The walls were scuffed and stained, and the air recycler made a constant low hum. This is where you'll stay, he said, stepping aside to let them enter. Lyra looked around the tiny space, her expression unreadable. Both of us? She asked. It's what's available, Jonas replied. She stepped inside, her movements careful and controlled. Kira followed, still clutching her doll. What if we don't want to stay here? Lyra asked, turning to face Jonas. Then you make things harder for yourselves, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. The door locks from the outside. Food will be brought to you. Don't try to leave. Lyra studied him with those piercing purple eyes, as if she was trying to see past his cold exterior to whatever humanity might be left underneath. Is this who you are? She asked quietly. A man who sells others to survive? The question hit him like a physical blow, but Jonas didn't let it show on his face. He'd built walls around his heart over the years, and he wasn't about to let them down now. I do what I have to, he said, turning to leave. You regret this, Lyra called after him, her voice low but certain. One day, you'll look back on this moment and wish you'd made a different choice. Jonas paused in the doorway but didn't turn around. Maybe, he said finally, but that's tomorrow's problem. He walked away, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a physical burden. Behind him, he heard the soft sound of the cabin door sliding shut, followed by the click of the lock engaging. The cockpit of the endless horizon was Jonas's sanctuary. It was the one place on the ship that felt truly his, filled with personal touches accumulated over years of travel. A faded photograph of his old military unit, a good luck charm given to him by a trader on Rylith, a small collection of coins. From different worlds, he settled into the pilot's chair and began the pre-flight sequence, his hands moving automatically over familiar controls. The ship's engines came online with a low rumble that he felt in his bones. It was a comforting sound, a reminder that despite everything else, he was still in control of his own destiny. As the endless horizon pulled away from Sigma Station, Jonas tried to focus on the technical aspects of the journey: navigation calculations, fuel consumption, hyperspace coordinates, anything to keep his mind off the passengers locked in the cabin behind him. But Kira's words kept echoing in his head. You're sad. Really, really sad. The kid was right, and that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He'd spent so many years building walls around his emotions that he'd almost convinced himself they weren't there anymore. But one look from an empathic child had stripped away all his carefully constructed defenses. He was sad and tired and worn down by years of making choices that kept him alive, but slowly killed something inside him. Each compromise, each moral corner he'd cut, had taken a little piece of his soul until he wasn't sure there was much left. The hyperspace jump went smoothly, and soon the endless horizon was racing through the star-speckled void toward Sector 5. Jonas leaned back in his chair and tried to get some sleep, but rest wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Kira's innocent face and Lyra's accusatory stare. A soft chime from the ship's internal communication system interrupted his brooding. He pressed the response button. What? He said, not bothering to hide his irritation. Mr. Cade? Lyra's voice came through the speaker, her accent giving his name a musical quality. There's a problem with the cabin. Jonas sighed. He'd been expecting something like this. What kind of problem? The air recycling system. It's not working properly. My daughter can barely breathe. For a moment, Jonas considered ignoring the complaint. The life support systems on the Endless Horizon were old and prone to breakdowns, but they were functional, probably functional enough to keep 2 passengers alive for the 3-day journey to Sector 5. But then he thought about Kira's small face, and he found himself getting up from the pilot's chair. The cabin was cramped with both passengers inside. Lyra stood near the air vent, her arms crossed and her expression sharp. Kira sat on the edge of the cot, her doll clutched tightly in her hands. The air did seem stale, though Jonas wasn't sure if it was actually a problem or just the result of 2 people breathing in a small space. The air is bad, Lyra said, pointing at the vent. My daughter has sensitive lungs. She needs clean air to breathe properly. Jonas crouched down to examine the vent, removing the cover to peer inside. The filtration unit was clogged with dust and debris, not enough to cause serious problems, but certainly enough to reduce air quality. It's not a luxury liner, he muttered, beginning to clean out the obstruction. That's obvious, Lyra said, her tone carrying more steel than complaint. But even prisoners deserve to breathe. Jonas shot her a look but didn't respond. He worked in silence, clearing out the dust and checking the connections. It was routine maintenance, the kind of thing he should have done weeks ago. Why do you fix things yourself? Kira asked, watching him work with curious eyes. Jonas paused, glancing at the child. Because no one else will. Don't you have any friends who could help? The question caught him off guard. Friends were a luxury he couldn't afford. In his line of work, trust was dangerous and emotional attachments could get you killed. Friends just cause problems, he said, returning to his work. That's not true, Kira said, hugging her doll tighter. Mama says friends help you when you're in trouble. Your mama's wrong. Lyra's sharp intake of breath made him look up. Her eyes were blazing with anger, and for a moment he thought she might actually attack him. My daughter doesn't need your cynicism, she said, her voice low and fierce. Jonas finished cleaning the vent and stood up. She asked a question. I answered it. You didn't have to answer like that. She's just a child. I'm not here to make friends, Jonas said, replacing the vent cover. I'm here to do a job. Then maybe you should remember that, Lyra shot back. And stop taking your guilt out on a 6-year-old girl. The words hit him harder than any physical blow could have. Jonas turned and left the cabin without another word. The sound of the door locking behind him, echoing in the narrow corridor. Back in the cockpit, he tried to focus on the navigation console, but his concentration was shot. He kept thinking about what Lyra had said. Was he taking his guilt out on them? Was his anger at the situation making him cruel to people who were already suffering? The truth was uncomfortable, but he couldn't deny it. He was angry at himself for taking the job, angry at the universe for putting him in a position where he had to make these kinds of choices, and angry at Lyra and Kira for making him feel guilty about it. A soft knock at the cockpit door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Come in, he said, not turning around. Small footsteps entered the room, and he saw Kira's reflection in the cockpit window. She was carrying a cup of water in her tiny hands, moving carefully so as not to spill it. Mama said you should drink this, she said, offering him the cup. Jonas turned around, surprised by the gesture. I'm fine. No, you're not, Kira said, with the certainty that only children possess. She held out the cup again. You need to drink water or you'll get sick. Jonas took the cup reluctantly, his fingers brushing against hers. Her skin was warm, and he could feel the faint energy that seemed to radiate from Alzari. It was oddly comforting. Thank you, he said quietly. Kira didn't leave. Instead, she stood there studying him with those impossibly bright eyes, as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. Why are you sad all the time? She asked. Jonas stiffened. The Zari's empathic abilities weren't just stories. She could actually sense his emotions, maybe even understand them better than he did himself. I'm not sad, he said, but the lie sounded hollow even to him. Yes, you are, Kira insisted. I can feel it. It's like a big dark cloud around you. Jonas set the cup down and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. How do you explain a lifetime of bad choices to a 6-year-old? How do you tell a child that sometimes the world forces you to become someone you never wanted to be? Why do you care? He asked instead. Kira's answer was so simple, so pure, that it hit him harder than any accusation could have. Because I like you, she said, Jonas looked away, unable to meet her innocent gaze. No one had said anything like that to him in years. Most people who dealt with him were either afraid, angry, or trying to use him for something. The idea that this child could like him, despite everything, was almost too much to process. "Please don't let them hurt us," Kira said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The words tore through Jonas's carefully constructed defenses like shrapnel through armor. His chest tightened, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. The weight of what he was doing, what he was about to do, crashed down on him all at once. He was delivering a mother and child into slavery. No amount of self-justification could change that fact. No matter how much he needed the money, no matter how desperate his situation, he was about to destroy 2 innocent lives for his own benefit. "Go back to your mother," he said, his voice rough. Kira lingered for a moment, as if she wanted to say something else. Then she nodded and slipped out of the cockpit, leaving Jonas alone with his guilt and the terrible knowledge of what he was becoming. The silence stretched on, broken only by the steady hum of the ship's engines. Jonas stared out at the stars, wondering when he'd stopped being the hero of his own story and become the villain instead. Suddenly, the ship's communication system crackled to life, filling the cockpit with static and an angry voice. "Unidentified vessel, respond immediately." Jonas sat up straight, his hands flying to the controls. A sleek black ship had appeared on his sensors, its design unmistakably predatory. "Pirates." The comm system crackled again. "Drop your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resist and we'll blast you into scrap metal." Jonas cursed under his breath, as if this day couldn't get any worse. Now he had pirates to deal with. He could try to run, but the endless horizon was old and slow, and the pirate ship looked fast and well armed. His hand hovered over the weapon controls. He could fight, but that would put Lyra and Kira in even more danger than they were already in. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, trying to decide how to protect the same people he was planning to sell into slavery. The pirate ship moved closer, its weapon systems powering up with an ominous glow. Jonas made his choice. Muttered, he switched to manual control and veered the endless horizon hard to starboard. The pirate ship followed its weapons charging. "Brace yourselves," he called over the comm. The first shot grazed the hull, sending a shudder through the ship. Jonas pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through an acid field in a desperate attempt to lose his pursuers. In the cabin, Lar held Kira close, her eyes darting to the shaking walls. "What's happening?" she shouted into the comm. "Trouble," Jonas replied. "Stay." Puth pirates gained on them, their ship faster and more maneuverable. Jonas's hands flew over the controls, his mind racing. He spotted a dirt cargo freighter drifting in the field. An idea struck him. "Hold tight," he said. He steered toward the freighter, angling the endless horizon towpath close. At the last second he fired, the ship's grappling and cable latching onto the freighter hull. The pirates followed, not realizing Jonas had cut the engines and was using the freighter momentum to slingshot around it as the pirate ship overshot its target. Jonas righted the engines and blasted away, leaving them scrambling to turn. He didn't wait to see if they'd recover. He pushed the ship toward hyperspace and initiated the jump. When the stars returned to their normal configuration, Jonas exhaled and slumped back in his seat. His hands trembled slightly, the adrenaline still coursing through him. The comm buzzed. "Are we safe?" "Lara scud for now," he said. "You handled that well," she admitted reluctantly. "Thanks," Jonas replied, surprised by the faint note of respect in her voice. But as he stared at the empty void ahead, he knew this wasn't over. The pirates weren't the only ones after him now. The decision got at the edges of his mind. He had broken protocol by escaping. That made him a liability to the Baron, and in his line of work, liabilities didn't last long. The endless horizon cruised through the murky expanse of the fringe territories, its engines running low and quiet. Outside the viewport, Thesters seemed distant and cold, their light swallowed by the graveyard of abandoned ships and asteroid debris. This was a place forgotten by most of the galaxy, and no man's land, where desperation bred opportunists, and Evan's smallest mistake could be fatal. Jonas Cade sat in the pilot's seat, one hand on the throttle, the other gripping a steaming cup of the coffee. His eyes remained fixed on the radar. So far, no pursuit signals had shown up, but that didn't mean they were safe. The Baron's reach extended farther than Jonas had to admit. Behind him, he could hear soft footsteps, hesitant but persistent. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Shouldn't you be with your mother?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Kyra's small form appeared in his peripheral vision, her luminous violet skin casting a faint glow in the dim cockpit. She held her tattered cloth doll tightly, her wide eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and fear. "She's resting," Kira said. "Can I stay here?" Jonas sighed. "This isn't a playground, I'm not playing." Her response made him glance at her, one eyebrow raised despite the childlike innocence in her voice. There was something resolute about her stance. She climbed onto the co-pilot's chair, her legs too short to reach the floor. For a moment she simply stared out at the void, her glowing skin reflecting faintly off the console. "Why does it feel so lonely here?" she asked, her voice soft. Jonas leaned back, resting his cup on the console. "That's the fringe. It's not meant to feel like anything but emptiness. No one stays here unless they're hiding from something or someone." Kira tilted her head, her gaze fixed on him. "What do you hiding from?" He chuckled, though the sound lacked humor. "Nothing, kid, I just don't like company." She hugged her doll tighter, her glowing eyes unblinking. "That's not true. You're hiding from yourself." Jonas stiffened. "Where you hear that?" "I didn't hear it. I feel it," Kira said, her voice matter of fact. "You're always sad and angry at the same time." "It's confusing." Jonas turned his attention back to the radar, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't poke around in people's feelings." "I can't help it," she said. "That's what Mama says." "Maybe your mama should teach you to mind your own business," he muttered. Kira's small face scrunched into a frown, but she didn't reply. She slid off the chair and padded silently out of the cockpit, leaving Jonas alone with the hum of the ship and the uneasy weight of her words. The endless horizon approached a small outpost nestled on the edge of a massive asteroid belt. It wasn't much to look at, just a cluster of rusted metal structures patched together with salvage parts. The docking platforms were overcrowded with ships in varying states of disrepair. Jonas knew this kind of place well. Here questions were unwelcome, and credits were. King headed the ship and powered down the engines. Before stepping off, he turned to Elle and Kira, who stood near the cabin entrance. "Stay on the ship," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "This place isn't safe." Lar crossed her arms, her violet skin shimmering faintly under the cabin lights. "Nowhere has been safe since you took us." Jonas frowned, but didn't rise to her challenge. "Just don't leave the ship," he said, grabbing his blaster and stepping out onto the docking platform. The air outside was thick and stale, the artificial atmosphere heavy with the scent of oil and rust. Jonas scanned the area, his eyes darting to every shadow and crevice. The market stretched ahead, a chaotic sprawl of vendors hawking everything from weapon parts to counterfeit stems. He made his way toward a stall run by a weary man with sunken eyes and a permanent sneer. "I need fuel and repairs," Jonas said, tossing a data chip onto the counter. The merchant picked up the chip and inspected it before glancing at Jonas. "You're lucky. Prices just went up." Jonas leaned closer, his voice low. "They'll go back down if you know what's good for you." The merchant's sneer widened. "Toy, aren't we? Fine, I'll give you a deal." "Oh no, on condition." "What condition?" "Condition." The merchant leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Word's been going around. There's a Z widow and her kid on they run. Big bounty on their heads. If you've seen anything or anyone, you let me know." Jonas's fingers twitched toward his blaster, but he kept his expression neutral. "Haven't seen anything like that." The merchant studied him for a moment before shrugging. "Shame. Could have made yourself a fortune." Jonas nodded curtly and walked away, his mind racing. Thebron's reach was wide than he'd feared. He couldn't stay here long, not with whispers of the bounty so close. Back on the ship, Jonas found Lar pacing the cabin, while Kira sat cross-legged on the cot, her doll in her lap. Lar turned to him, her expression sharp. "What happened?" "We're leaving," Jonas said, brushing past her to the cockpit. "Why? What did you find out?" She pressed, following him. "The bounty's breeding," he said, his voice clipped. "It's not safe here. It's never safe." Lar snapped. "When we stop running, when we're out of places to run to." Jonas shot back, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "You can't keep making decisions for us," Lar said, her voice rising. "We not your prisoners." Jonas rounded on her, his eyes blazing. "You alive because of me." Don't forget that the tension between them was thick enough to cut. Kira's small voice broke the silence. "Mama, stop. He's trying to help." Laura's shoulders sagged, her anger giving way to exhaustion. "Then he needs to tell us what's going on." "All of it at." Jonas sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. The Baron's got eyes everywhere. This outpost isn't safe and neither is the next one. I don't know where we're going yet, but staying here isn't an option. Lars studied him for a moment before nodding reluctantly. Just don't lie to us if we're going to survive. We need to trust each other. Jonas didn't respond. Bond. He returned to the cockpit, his mind a storm of plans and doubts. As the ship lifted off, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The fringe was vast, but even it won't be able to hide them forever. The endless horizon landed with a sharp hiss of depressurization, its engine sputtering before falling silent. Outside, the desolate moon stretched into jagged cliffs and arid plains. The sky above swirled with gray and green clouds, their ominous churn hinting at volatile weather. The moon was abandoned long ago, a forgotten relic of some failed terraforming project. For Jonas, it was the perfect hiding spot. He powered down the ship and turned to Lar, who stood at the entrance to the cockpit with Kira peeking around her legs. We stay low, keep quiet, and don't light fires. This place might be off the maps, but we're not taking any chances. Lar crossed her arms. And how long do we plan to stay here? Forever. Jonas leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. Until I figure out where we're going next. That's not a plan, she said sharply. It's survival, Jonas replied. Take it or leave it. Kira's small voice interrupted them. Can we go outside? Both adults turned to her. Jonas's first instinct was to say no, but something about her hopeful expression made him hesitate. It's not safe, Lars said firmly, placing a protective hand on Kira's shoulder. Jonas glanced at the barren terrain outside, scanning for threats. The moon's desolation seemed absolute, but he knew better than to trust appearances. Stay close to the ship, he said, surprising himself with his own concession. The air outside was thin and sharp, carrying the acrid tang of unfiltered oxygen. Kira bounded ahead, her bare feet kicking up the fine gray dust hat coated the ground. Her violet skin shimmered faintly in the dim light, and her laughter echoed against the cliffs. For a moment it was almost possible to forget the danger they were in. Lar trailed behind her daughter, her movements tense as she scanned the horizon. Jonas stayed closer to the ship, his blaster holstered but within easy reach. He didn't trust the silence. You don't have to watch her like a hawk, Jonas said, his tone softer than usual. Let her be a kid for 5 minutes. Lars shot him a look. Being a child doesn't make her immune to danger, neither does wrapping her in bubble wrap, Jonas countered. Lar opened her mouth to reply but stopped. Her gaze shifted past him, her body stiffening. Jonas followed her line of sight. A faint shimmer flickered against the cliffs, a distortion like heat waves rippling through the air. Back to the ship, Jonas said, his voice low and urgent. What is it? Lar asked, dipping Kira toward her cloaking tech. Jonas muttered, someone's here. They barely made it inside the ship before the first shot rang out. The hull reverberated with the impact, the sound off deafening clang that sent Kira diving into her mother's arms. Jonas hit the controls, sealing the hatch and activating the ship's external defenses. Who is it? Lar asked, her voice steady despite the tension in her face. Could be scavengers, bounty hunters, or worse, Jonas said as he powered up the ship's engines. Doesn't matter. We're not sticking around to find out. Through the viewport, Jonas caught a glimpse of Thyre attackers, 3 figures in sleek black armor, their movements fluid and calculated. They carried pulse rifles, the barrels glowing faint as they unleashed another volley. The ship shuddered under the assault. They found us fast, Lars said, gripping Kira tightly. How doesn't matter, Jonas said. Hold on. He slammed the throttle and the endless horizon lurched into motion, kicking up a cloud of dust as it lifted off. The attackers pursued on foot, their rifles trained on the ship. One of them launched a small glowing orb that stuck to the hull with a metallic thaham. Jonas shouted, veering the ship sharply to the left. The orb detonated, sending a wave of energy rippling across the ship. The lights flickered and the engine sputtered. Can you fix it? Lara asked, her voice tight with fear. Working on it, Jonas said through gritted teeth. He rerouted power manually, bypassing the fried circuits. The ship groaned in protest, but stabilized, the engines roaring back to life. Jonas pushed them hard, the endless horizon breaking through the moon's atmosphere and into open space. In their relative safety of hyperspace, Jonas slumped back in his chair, sweat dripping from his brow. Elle stood nearby, her arms still wrapped protectively around Kira, who had buried her face in her mother's shoulder. What now? Lara asked, her voice a mixture of exhaustion and frustration. Jonas didn't answer immediately. He stared at the streaking stars outside the viewport, his mind racing. Whoever was after them wasn't going to stop. The EMP device was military grade, far beyond what most bounty hunters could afford. That left only one option. The Baron's men. We can't outrun them forever, Jonas said finally. They'll keep coming. Then we fight. Lyra said, her tone resolute. Jonas looked at her, surprised by the fierceness in her eyes. You don't even know what we're up against. I don't need to, she said. If we keep running, they'll find us eventually. If we fight, at least we have a chance. Jonas shook his head. It's suicide. It's survival, Al countered, throwing his earlier words back at him. Kira looked up, her small voice breaking the tension. We're strong. Mamas say stronger than they know. Jonas met the child's glowing gaze, her innocence tinged with a wisdom far beyond her years. He exhaled slowly, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. All right, he said finally, but if we're going to fight, we do it on our terms. We find somewhere to prepare, somewhere they won't see coming. And where is that? Lar asked. Jonas didn't answer immediately. He stared at the navigation console, his fingers hovering over the controls. An idea began to take shape. Dangerous, but possibly their best chance. There's a place, he said, but getting there won't be easy. Nothing has been, Lar replied. Jonas glanced at her, then at Kira. Then we'd better get moving. The endless horizon urged from hyperspace, its engines rattling like a wounded animal. Before them stretched a planet cloaked in eternal dusk, its surface a patchwork of barren plains, jagged mountains, and blackened forests. It looked like a corpse of a world gutted and left to rot. The sight sent a chill through Jonas Cade, though he didn't let it show. He gripped the controls tightly as he guided the ship into the planet's atmosphere, his jaw clenched and his eyes narrowed, betraying the unease he felt being here again. Every broken ridge and scorched valley seemed to claw his memories, dragging him back to the man he'd been when this planet still breathed. What is this place? Lar asked from behind him. Her tone was cautious, probing. Jonas didn't turn. A mistake, he muttered, his voice taut. Kira, sitting beside her mother, pressed her small hands against the viewport. Her glowing violet eyes scanned the surface wide with curiosity. It feels strange, like it's heavy. It's the weight of death, Jonas said, his voice low. This world is a graveyard. He brought the ship down near a jagged ridge, where the charred remains of trees formed skeletal silhouettes in the dusky sky. Dust swirled as the endless horizon touched down, settling like ash. Jonas powered down the engines and sat motionless for a moment, staring out at the desolation. We'll be safe here for now, Hazade, finally unbuckling his harness. No one comes to this place. There's nothing left to take. The air outside was thin and acrid, carrying the faint metallic tang of decay. Kira followed her mother cautiously, her small feet kicking up black and dust with each step. Jonas led the way, his movements brisk but purposeful. He didn't want to stay here longer than necessary. What happened to this plan? Laura asked, breaking the silence. Jonas stopped, his back to her for a moment. He didn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. War, the kind that doesn't leave survivors. Were you Hirawa pressed? Her tone sharper now. Jonas turned to face her, his eyes hard. I fought here. That's all you need to know. Lar held his gaze, her expression unyielding. I think it's not all I need to know. Not if we're trusting you. Jonas exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This planet used to belong to the Baron's enemies. Rebels, freedom fighters, whatever you want to call them. He fought with them. We thought we could win. He gestured to the Baron. Landscapithus was the result. Kira tugged on her mother's sleeve, her small voice breaking the tension. Why did you lose? Jonas knelt down, his expression softening slightly, as he looked at her. Because we didn't know what we were up against. The Baron doesn't just destroy his enemies. He destroys everything they touch. Their homes, their people, their hope. Kira's glowing eyes shimmered with sadness. She reached out and placed her small hand on Jonas's arm. It wasn't your fault. Jonas' threat heightened and he looked away. Let's just find shelter. They stopped at the base of a crumbling tower, its surface pock-marked with scorch marks and overgrown with jagged crystallines. Jonas knelt by a rusted hatch partially buried in the ground. With a grunt he pried it open, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. What is this place? Lara asked, her voice wary. An old bunker. Jonas Sadeway used them during the war. Should still be intact. He climbed out down first, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The bunker smelled of rust and mildew, its walls lined with empty shelves and broken crates. A single table stood in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs. Their legs warped from the damp, Kyra climbed down next, followed by Lar. The girl wandered toward a corner, her gaze fixed on something Jonas couldn't see. "What is it?" Jonas asked, stepping closer. "There's something here," Kira said, pointing to a pile of rubble. Jonas and Lar exchanged a look before clearing away the debris. Beneath the rubble was a small cylindrical object embedded in the wall. Its surface glowed faintly, etched with intricate symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. "That's G," Lar whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "What's it doing here?" Jonas asked. "This planet was ours since," Lar said, "before the Barren War." Kira reached out, her fingers brushing the artifact. The light intensified, bathing the room in a soft glow. Jonas stepped back, his hand instinctively moving to his blaster. "What's happening?" he demanded. Kira closed her eyes, her expression serene. "It's showing me," she said, her voice distant. "Showing you what?" Jonas asked, his voice sharp. Kira opened her eyes and they glowed brighter than a place. "Where we'll be safe," Jonas frowned, his skepticism clear. "How can Yauk know that I just do?" Kira said simply. Lar knelt beside her daughter, her expression conflict. "The artifacts of my people don't lie," she said softly. "They guide you." Jonas rubbed the back of his neck, his mind racing. He didn't trust the artifact, but Kira's certainty was unnerving. "If this is a trap." "It's not," Lar interrupted. "If the artifact says there's a safe place, then there is." Jonas exhaled heavily, the weight of their next move pressing down on him. "Then let's hop. You're right. Because if you're not, we're out of options." They spent the night in the bunker, its cold walls offering little comfort but adequate protection. Jonas sat alone by the hatch, his blaster resting across his lap. His gaze lingered in the artifact, its soft glow a reminder of how little control he had over the situation. Lar approached him, her footsteps light. "You don't trust it?" she said, more a statement than a question. "I didn't trust anything I can't explain," Jonas replied. Lar sat beside him, her eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes faith is all we have. My people believed in these artifacts for generations. They guided us, warned us, protected us." Jonas shook his head. "Faith didn't save this planet." "No," Lar admitted, "but it might save us." Jonas looked at her, his expression guarded. "If you're wrong, we all die. And if I'm right," she countered. Jonas didn't answer. Instead, he turned his gaze back to the hatch, the cold steel beneath his hands grounding him in a world that felt increasingly uncertain. The next morning, they prepared to leave. The artifact now sat securely in a crate, its faint glow visible even through the slats. As they boarded the endless horizon, Jonas couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into the unknown. Kira sat beside him in the cockpit, her small hand resting on the armrest. "It's going to be okay," she said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. Jonas glanced at her, his hardened expression softening. "I hope you're right, kid." As the ship lifted off, the barren planet receded into the distance. Jonas felt the weight of its memories slipping away, replaced by the uncertain promise of what lay ahead. The endless horizon hovered above a swirling nebula of green and gold, its engines humming softly as Jonas Cade studied the holographic display in the cockpit. The coordinates from the Zari artifact had led them to this uncharted region, far from established trade routes or any signs of life. It felt too quiet, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. Kira sat beside him, her small hands folded neatly in her lap, her wide, glowing eyes stared out at the nebula. "It feels safe," said softly. Jonas frowned. "Safe doesn't mean unguarded. Places like this don't stay hidden by accident behind them." Lars stepped into the cockpit, her sharp gaze flicking between the display and the view outside. "The artifact wouldn't guide us into a trap," she said, though her tone carried the weight of uncertainty. Jonas grunted, his skepticism unshaken. "That's a lot of trust to put in an ancient rock." "It's more than a rock," Lars snapped. "It's part of us. Part of how we're before the Baron destroyed everything." Before Jonas could reply, Theradar flashed red. A small fleet of ships appeared at the edge of the nebula, their sleek black hulls unmistakable. The Baron hunters had found them. The comm system crackled, and a cold mechanical voice filled the cockpit. "Jari vessel, power down your engines and surrender. Resistance will not be tolerated." Jonas clenched his jaw. "They've been tracking us since the moon," he muttered. Lars stepped forward, her voice steady. "We can't outrun them." Jonas's fingers tightened around the controls. "We not running." He activated the ship's weapon systems, the hum of power reverberating through the hull. The Endless Horizon was no warship, but it carried enough firepower to make a fight interesting. Jonas set the ship on an evasive course, weaving between the glowing tendrils of the nebula. The first volley of plasma bolts streaked past them, illuminating the cockpit in bursts of blue and orange. Jonas returned fire, the ship's turrets blazing as he aimed for the nearest hunter. The explosion lit up the nebula, briefly scattering the enemy formation. "They'll adapt," Lar warned, gripping the back of his seat. "Then we'll have to keep surprising them," Jonas said. He banked sharply, dodging another barrage. Kira stood, her small frame steady despite the turbulence. "There's a way out," she said, her voice calm, turgent. Jonas glanced at her. "What are you talking about?" The artifact showed Methers a place inside the nebula where they can't follow. "Can't or won't?" Jonas demanded. Kira looked at him, her eyes glowing brighter. Both guided by Kira, Jonas pushed the ship deeper into the nebula. The sensors flickered and failed, overwhelmed by the electromagnetic. The glowing tendrils thickened, coiling around the ship like living veins. The hunters hesitated at the nebula's edge, their formation breaking apart as they attempted to navigate the hazard du Senvarant. One ship pressed forward, its determination mirroring the Baron's ruthless will. Jonas fired again, his aim true. The hunter ship erupted in flames, its wreckage swallowed by the swirling mists. "They won't stop," said her voice tight with frustration. "They don't have to," Jonas replied grimly. "They just need to outlast us." Kira stepped closer to the console, her hands brushing the artifact's surface where it rested on the dashboard. Its glow pulsed in rhythm with her own, casting soft light across her face. "We're close," she said. Ahead, the nebula parted, revealing a massive structure suspended in the void. Its surface shimmered with the same intricate patterns etched into the artifact, its architecture both organic and technological. It was ancient yet pristine, a remnant of a time before the Baron's conquest. Lar gasped. "It's a sanctuary." The hunters reached the clearing, their weapons charging. Jonas maneuvered toward the structure, scanning for an entry point. A hatch opened along its side, a bright beam of light extending toward them. "Looks like we're invited," Jonas muttered, steering the ship inside. The interior of the sanctuary was vast, its walls alive with shifting light and pulsating energy. The air felt thick but breathable, carrying a faint hum that resonated in their chests. Jonas powered down the ship and unbuckled his harness, his eyes scanning the strange environment. "What now?" he asked, his voice chewing slightly. Kira stepped forward, the artifact cradled in her hands. "This place will protect us?" "How?" Jonas asked, his tone skeptical. Before Kira could answer, the sanctuary seemed to react. Light flowed from the walls, converging around the artifact. Symbols and shapes formed in the air, their meaning incomprehensible to Jonah, but clearly understood by Kira. She turned to them, her expression calm and confident. "It's a shield," she said. "Nothing can get in while we're here." Outside, the hunters fired on the sanctuary, their plasma bolts dissipating harmlessly against its shimmering surface. Inside, Jonas watched the display, his body tense. "Despite Kira's assurance, this won't last forever," he said. "They'll find a way to break through," Nolar said, her voice firm. "They won't. The sanctuary's power comes from us, from Zari. As long as we're here, it's unbreakable." Jonas stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "So this is it? The end of the line?" "It's a beginning," Lar said. "For all of us." Fezinkchuri's hum deepened, filling the air with a sense of peace Jonas hadn't felt in years. He looked at Kira, her small frame glowing brighter than ever. She was more than a child. She was hope, a chance to rebuild what the Baron had destroyed. As the hunters retreated, unable to penetrate the sanctuary's defenses, Jonas felt something shift within him. He wasn't just a mercenary anymore. He was part of something bigger, something worth fighting for. "We're not just surviving," he said quietly. "We fighting back." Lar placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch steady and reassuring. "And this time we'll win." The Endless Horizon rested in the sanctuary's embrace, its crew no longer running, but preparing for the battles ahead. Together they would face whatever came next. Together, they would build a future.